the DrumWise Meet, and today I'm with Jared Falk from Drumeo. Hi, Jared.
Hey, Tom. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So my first question is the typical question. What is your equipment setup?
My right now, what I'm playing is a 7-piece Yamaha recording custom in piano black. It was the one that they released with Steve Gadd a few years ago at NAMM, and so I got that kit, and it's got like 5 toms, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 22-inch kick, and I just put on 3 roto toms, which I'm like, I don't know, I just something about them, the sound and the way they cut. I don't know how much actual music I'd play them in, but it's fun to goof around with. And then for cymbals, I'm playing Peisty. I just put the new Formula 602 reissue cymbals on, and just really love like it's a little bit of a classic sound, but you know, made in obviously the modern times. So they're beautiful cymbals. And then I run everything through on my home setup. I run everything through a Yamaha EAD, and so that's how I kind of practice. That's how I do I do some basic live streaming and stuff from home on my own. It's nothing like the setup here at our studio, but that's what I'm using.
Good stuff. So what age did you start playing, and when you started playing, what sort of music influenced you? And then going on from that, what was your first drum set?
I started playing when I was 15, and really prior to that, I actually remember saying, like, I think I was in grade 6 or 7. I remember saying, I don't like music. I don't ever want to be involved in music. And for some reason, so like growing up till I decided to play drums, I wasn't actually really into music at all. But for some reason, there was like a switch that went off in my brain that said, okay, you kind of like that. I saw someone air drumming, and I watched other drummers, and like, you know what, that looks really, really fun. And so, I asked my parents, and I started playing drums. They got me, it was an old vintage Pearl kit, which my grandparents bought for my aunt and my dad in the early 70s. They bought it used. And so I still have that kit now. We actually might start restoring it, because it's like where the spurs go into the bass drum, it's starting to sink in and stuff. So I want to just restore it to put it on display here. But that was my first kit, and the music that I started listening to, it was like the 90s when I started playing. So I started playing when I was 15, so that would be 1996, and I was really into like the you know, it's coming out of the grunge era, right? So I was into Foo Fighters, I was into Collective Soul, U2, Our Lady Peace, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden. Dave Matthews Band was like farther away from the grunge stuff and more into like fusion, funk, that type of thing. And then later on, I got into like some more quirky stuff like Dave Brubeck Quartet, and I really got into Toto. But yeah, I really like simple pop music with a great groove and a nice hook.
Awesome. Now, this one is a bit of a loaded question, because I don't think there's a clean-cut answer to this, for me anyway. But do you have an all-time favorite drummer?
Yes, for sure. My all-time favorite drummer is Carter Beauford from the Dave Matthews Band. Yeah, I like the fact that he can play disciplined and he can play specific parts, or he can really think outside and play outside of the box. And I think a lot of the way he plays and how he matches the vocal of Dave Matthews and what he's listening for, because it's a very different type of band when it comes to, like, they have a violin player, they have a sax player. Sometimes they have an electric guitar player, sometimes they don't. So there's a lot of people in the band, but yet he's able to get his message across in a really fun, playful, engaging way. And that's why I think himself as a drummer is a favorite musician for a lot of people who don't even play drums. You know, they just like the parts that he's creating. So I love Carter Beauford.
Cool. I think the reason I said that before the question is because I think like when we're younger and stuff, our influences maybe change like as we grow up as musicians and so on. Certainly for me anyway, my influences changed. You know, the stuff I was doing when I was 15, I'm still into it, but I've got so many more influences now, and I'm sure you know you're the same.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the list of influences is long, and you know, I've even been very lucky with Drumeo to just meet and work with many of the people that influenced me, like you know, like Benny Greb, like Thomas Lang, like a lot of these amazing drummers that I've had the opportunity to work with.
Whether this be through playing or teaching, what's been the highlight of your career so far?
Highlight of my career, oh man. You know what? I'd have to say, recently like this year in February, we did our first Drumeo festival, and it was really like leading up to it. Like 2 weeks before, I was literally thinking, can I cancel this thing? Is it too late? Because you know, it's doing an event is not something like I never thought it was that much work. It was like it's just not an easy thing to do where you're selling tickets to a worldwide audience. People are flying into this event. Artists are coming in from all around the world. There's just massive amounts of logistics. And just to see everyone there and to really to see like how this community of drummers comes together and instantly everyone's really good friends and friendly. Like there was not one argument, one fight, no drama at our event, and there's like 600 or 700 people there, and it just went really really smoothly. And walking out on stage to like do the opening presentation, and seeing the crowd of so many people that I've got to know over the years in the industry as well as our students was just like a real big highlight for me, and I'll absolutely never forget it. It's like the equivalent of the first big gig I played in front of like 4,000 or 5,000 people.
And you've said something there actually that I think is very important to highlight. I think the drumming community is such a great thing to be a part of. I mean, I've never been a part of the guitar community or the keyboard community, but I don't know whether they have the same kind of community as us. And you know, me reaching out to people to do videos, so many people have said yes because we're all into the same thing and we're all passionate about this one thing. And I think, yeah, drummers are just great, don't you think?
Well, yeah, because I am part of the piano community and the guitar community. We own guitarlessons.com and pianolessons.com, and we have brands in both of those spaces under the Musora umbrella. But the big difference I think between drummers and people who play those instruments is drums. Yes, you can play it on your own, but it's very much a supporting instrument to a band. So it's really required to play with other people. In guitar and piano, there's a lot of singer-songwriters, solo musicians who do their own gigs, and that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But also, when I look at like where you're sitting in this beautiful studio. You know, you've dedicated an entire room. You've put your DrumWise on the wall behind you. You know, like you're committed. This isn't just like a guitar sitting in the corner or something like that. And so the fact that drummers in general have to commit at that level, like I just went with one of my friends and he bought a new kit, and he's a hobby drummer, successful businessman in construction. He bought a new kit and he's like, oh, now I'm building an entire bunker in my house for my new drum set. And he's so committed. So someone that is that deep into it, if they meet someone else who's that deep into it, it's like an instant bond.
Yeah, absolutely. So going on to talk about your teaching side of things now. So what made you start teaching and when did you start?
I started playing drums when I was 15, and 12 months after that, 12 to 18 months, I was playing in church. And you know, like the learning curve when you first start drumming, it's quick, right? You can start playing beats and songs pretty quickly, and once you know the money beat and a few other things, like you can play a lot of tunes. So I was like a obsessive practicer when I first started, and so my learning curve in the beginning was quick. Now in my old age, it's slowed down a lot. I can't easily teach this old dog new tricks, but back then it was like I got good fast, and then I was playing in church, and then afterwards I had like multiple people just come up and say, "Can you teach my son or drums?" And so I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I guess." And so I started teaching around a year and a half um, after starting to play, and the whole time when I was starting to teach, I was also taking lessons, and so I was really immersing myself into the instrument from right at the beginning. Whereas I think a lot of people start and then they'll take breaks, they'll lose interest, they'll come back to it, they'll lose interest, come back to it. But for me, it was like the way I work in general is it's off or on. It's like there's no in between. And so when I started playing and I liked it, it was on, and then I started teaching, and then I was on, and then I kept teaching, and now I'm still teaching 20 years later.
Hmm. That's interesting. I didn't know that, and
Hmm,
that's a very similar story to me. So a lot of my
cool.
students don't even know my story. Where yeah, I actually started playing drums in a church group, and then yeah, people would come up and say, "Oh, do you want to teach little Jimmy?" And it just grew and grew and grew. So how weird. There you go.
That's awesome, dude.
Same sort of story.
Yeah.
Here we are now talking over the internet, Canada to UK. Things have changed. Eh?
Yeah.
So, what do you find that students struggle the most with?
I think students really struggle with setting reasonable expectations on what their progress should be, especially nowadays with social media coming out. Like when I first started doing online lessons, there was no social media. It didn't exist. There wasn't even MySpace when we first started. Uh, and that means there was no YouTube, no Facebook. And so it was very different in that, like, when I was putting videos online, like I've never been the best drummer. I never have claimed to be the best drummer. I'm someone who loves drums and can teach effectively, and I don't teach the most advanced drummers. I teach more beginner, intermediate level drummers, and I love it because I feel like I can have the most effect on people then at those times. But so back then when I was doing it, I was just putting videos up. I wasn't ever comparing myself to anyone because there's really no one to compare yourself to back then, other than a few other people that were dabbling and stuff. So now I think drummers have it a lot harder in that whenever they think about putting videos online or sharing about with what they're doing with their drumming, right away their head goes to, oh, but I'm not as good as him or her, so I can't do it. Or my video quality is not as good, so I can't do it. And the right away they get in their head and they start making excuses. And music is very much about performance. It's very much about including other people. And I think it's really part of the development. And so I think drummers really struggle with um, their own self-doubt and struggling with their own expectations on how good they should be based on how long they've been playing or based on how much they've practiced. And they really just need to try and get out of that. I know it's very hard, but try and get away from that and say, what do I want to do? What's going to make me happy? And really think of it more from a personal point of view as opposed to just constantly comparing themselves.
Mm. What sort of person does it take to be a good drum teacher? And by this as well, if you could maybe mention how you feel about good drummers not necessarily being the best teachers, because I feel that they are two different things. You can have an incredible drummer who you go to see
Mm-hmm.
for a lesson, and it may not be the best lesson. So what
Yeah. Well, you have a guy like Sean McVay. He's the coach on the LA Rams, right? He is 34 years old when he became the head coach. 34 years old, you could still play in the NFL. So you could say, well, if he's not good enough to play in the NFL, why is he good enough to coach? And it's like, he's probably just better at coaching than playing. And that doesn't mean, if you can't teach, that's a bit of a ridiculous quote. And in some cases, that might be true for some people. But for the good teachers, the reason they're teaching is because they're freaking amazing teachers, and this is where they were personally led and what they were led to do. So when it comes to like the qualities of a good teacher, I think one underrated quality, and that it's not talked about enough, is empathy within your instruction. And there's a guy named Justin Sanderco. He runs a website called justinguitar.com, and he's a really, really good teacher. And he came out here to our facility to do a guitar camp, and I really got to talking to him about education. And he's been doing online lessons pretty much longer, or as long as I've been doing it. So we have a lot of camaraderie in that way, and that we've both been in this business for a while. But one thing he did is he said he's doing a new beginner course on guitar, and he basically got a left-handed guitar and learned guitar left-handed because he wanted to remember what it's like to be a beginner, you know? And so he said things like, you know, my students would always complain about their fingers hurting, and I would always tell them to just toughen up and stop being such a baby. But he says when he started doing this, in the other hand, he's like, yeah, you know, I'm not used to that. And so he had more, he was able to have more empathy for that situation, and then actually as an educator come up with a result that's really going to help them. And so I was really impressed by that, and it really made me think, like, how can we as educators here at Drumeo, how can we better connect to our students in what and how they're actually feeling? Because if we can get closer to that, then we can actually provide a better solution. And teachers are really there to provide that solution and give guidance. You know, we're very much the guide, and our students are the heroes.
What do you find rewarding about teaching?
The biggest reward is seeing how it affects someone else's life, and how many different ways it can affect someone's life. So like during the whole COVID stuff, like it's amazing how many people are using online lessons, and because they're staying at home, and the messages we've been getting have just been absolutely incredible. Stuff like they're a nurse, and after they get off a busy shift, they just love to go and bash on their drums, and they learn through Drumeo lessons. And so that's one result of someone using our lessons. We had another student who he was dealing with a brain disease, and he was losing motor functions, and the doctor suggested that he do something like drumming to continue keep those motor functions going. And so that's a completely different thing. Then I had someone at when I was at NAM earlier this year, they came up to me and said, I was 11 when I started watching your free drum lessons videos. I'm 20 now. I'm touring with a band full time. We are on a we have a record deal. We just put our first album, and I just want to thank you for all your help in the early days when I was first getting started. I think that's like the dream for every teacher, to experience things like that. You know, that's super rewarding to know that you can have a positive effect on someone else like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving away from the teaching questions slightly here, this one, I feel that we're quite lucky because we do something that we love for our job, and you know that for me, that that's just a great thing to be able to do every day. Wake up and
Right.
do drums. But I think for every drummer that does something to do with drums as a job, drums started as a hobby, and we're just lucky that hobby has become our job. But what are your other hobbies away from drums?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have 2 kids, and when I'm not here working, or I'm not traveling, then I try and spend time with them every single day. And so I would consider that one of my, you could call it a hobby or an obligation, but it's fun. I like working on my yard, so I don't have a ton of land, but me and my wife always love going out there. We just planted a garden, so we're going to do some of that. We always go for bike rides around the area. We live right beside the river, so I'm biking all the time. And fishing, I go fishing every spring and summer, just because you can go to a place where there's no internet signal, and and you can just like fish for a while. I play video games. I like to play StarCraft. I play virtual reality. I just got an Oculus Quest. I play like Halo, stuff like that. So there's lots of things. I play poker. I play fantasy football. You know, there's like lots of like random things, but I just kind of like dabble. But drumming is definitely at the top of everything.
Yeah, so you still class drums as a hobby, even though it's a job.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely more of a hobby now than ever. Like yesterday, I filmed a few talking head videos. I did a leadership meeting, and then I led my whole staff meeting. I had like 40 staff, so it's very most of my job is very corporate. You know, like finance meetings, and I was dealing with like currency exchange stuff and like all this like weird stuff that's not drumming related at all. You know, lots of HR related stuff because I have so many staff now, and we're adding more. And so I deal with a lot of like business management stuff in general. And so when I go home is when I engage in my hobbies. And so I'll go home later and I'll practice.
And that actually leads me on to maybe something else, if you don't mind me asking. So for people that want to make drums their living, whether it's teaching or playing, would you recommend anything in the way of like researching how to run a business, or, you know, how to do your own taxes and things like that? Is that an important thing for a drummer?
Yeah. So I think I would say in my DNA, I think I was born to be an entrepreneur, in that my grandpa dropped out of school when he was in grade 6. And then my dad was running like a massive 50 to 100 person crew when he was 19 or 18, even something like that. Like he was just, and he's been both. I've just been shown entrepreneurship from a very young age. And so I started a rollerblade repair shop when I was in the 6th grade. I started selling hockey cards on the internet when I was in the 8th grade, you know, and then I was just really, really into finding a way to do my own thing, and rather than having to go to a normal job. And so for me, that's like the discipline I developed. And I read lots of books on that coming out of high school, lots of books related to marketing, digital marketing, business, leadership. And it was something where it was very natural for me. It felt good. It was easy. I liked it. And so I think everyone has that. Like, I would be surprised if someone who is into drumming just said that's all they're into. Like, they're not into anything else. They only want to play drums. And so I would tell people, if you want to play drums as your job, then it's really good to learn some related skills. So someone like, even like guys like, you know, Rich Redmond, for example, he's a drummer for Jason Aldean. Excuse me. He's a drummer for Jason Aldean, but yet he's a great like host. He's an actor. He does his own podcast. You know, he's not just like a one-trick pony. He's really he's figuring out other avenues. And so I always tell people, like, do your drumming, but then learn like digital marketing, or learn how to build websites, or learn graphic design, or learn audio engineering, or video editing, or social media marketing, whatever else that could be a huge benefit from your hobby. We have lots of drummers who are learning, who do code and stuff like that. So then they make little apps and things like that, which I think is awesome.
So you think it's useful for drummers to have another string to their bow, sort of thing?
So there's many like good reasons to be able to add more value to the band that you're joining, or even if you end up just drumming, if you could do something else for that group. Because everyone knows on tour, you're traveling for 23 hours and you're playing an hour gig, and then you're traveling for 23 hours, you know, so there's a lot of downtime, and I think a lot of musicians waste too much time. That's where they kind of get, the road kind of eats them alive, and they get into substance abuse and other things, which are no good. So spend your time on learning other things.
Awesome. Little curveball question for you here. Probably the most important question. So what's your favorite cookie?
My favorite cookie? I like oatmeal chocolate chip cookies. Yes, simple, no raisins though. Raisins are disgusting, but a lot of people like raisins. But just the oatmeal chocolate chip would be which I never even get to really have them, but I love them.
Is that something that in the UK we're quite big on, like dunking our biscuits in tea? Is that something you dunk in tea or coffee?
I will, but not regularly.
Okay.
No.
You're not. If you could give one bit of advice for up and coming drummers, what would that be?
I think the biggest thing is stay humble and stay hungry. You know, don't ever think like you deserve this because you practice hard or because you are who you are. You think you're someone special. Like there's a lot of great people out there doing a lot of cool things, and so um, stay humble and work and continue to work hard. When I say hungry, I always operate like in business, especially like someone is like right at my heels, nipping at my heels, trying to take us down because that's the way the market works. And so I like to always be having a mindset of, okay, I've never got it. I'm never complacent. I don't like stagnance. Stagnance to me is death. So I have to keep evolving. I have to keep growing. And as soon as I stop doing that, I feel that's when the humble attitude leaves. And that's when I start getting cocky. And that's when you become most vulnerable. So stay humble, stay hungry.
Great advice. So, Jared, thank you so much for joining us here at DrumWise today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. All the best and stay safe.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.